Last Halloween, we looked at 13 coasters that seemed like they were gone forever, but turns out it wasn't their time. But these coasters weren't alone. No, there's a full-on coaster zombie apocalypse going on here. And you know what? In this case, that's actually a good thing. Nobody likes losing coasters, and once upon a time, these looked like they were done. But fate stepped in, and they live on today. These are 13 more coasters that came back from the dead. Number 13, Speed of Sound at Walibi Holland. When Premier Parks rebranded this as a Six Flags park in 2000, they introduced 4 new coasters. One of them was this Vekoma boomerang, going by the name Lavia Volta, its Italian translation being the turning road. It was a rocky decade for this park, as Six Flags sold it off in 2004, along with all their other European properties, and was then owned by Star Parks, who then sold the park again in 2006. Despite only being 7 years old, by the start of summer in 2007, Lavia Volta shut down. Its train was sold to the Boomerang that was just relocated to Pleasurewood Hills in the UK, and it sat dormant for the rest of 2007, and 2008, and 2009. There was a sense this would be reopened at some point, but the years kept on passing by, and in 2010 it was finally official. Lavia Volta would not be torn down. It would be reborn for the 2011 season. It would get a repaint and a brand new Vekoma train with on-ride audio and a tunnel on the first lift hill. This has become one of the most unique boomerang experiences in the world. Number 12, Skyliner at Lakemont Park. In 1960, John C. Allen opened a new coaster at Roseland Park in New York. This was Skyliner, his first full-size coaster, and it led him to design other classics that are still loved today, like Cedar Point's Blue Streak, Family Kingdom's Swamp Fox, Kings Island's Racer, and so many others. Skyliner was a big success, operating for 25 years until Roseland Park shut down. In the past, this may have been a death blow for an aging wooden coaster, but there was another important development in 1985. Knoebels had successfully moved the rocket from San Antonio's Playland Park and reopened it that same year, and that was not lost on the owners of Lakemont Park, a small park just 133 miles southwest of Knoebels. Lakemont bought Skyliner, rebuilt it in the northwest corner of the park, and 2 years after it closed down, it was officially back in action in its new home. 36 years later, it's still a star attraction, cheering on the minor league Altoona curve on every cycle. Number 11, Yankee Cannonball at Canopy Lake Park. Even the old-timers associate this coaster with Canopy Lake Park, though they may remember this as Greyhound. That was its name between 1936 and 1982, but its history dates back even further. This Herbert Paul Schmeck PTC wooden coaster started at Lakewood Park in Waterbury, Connecticut, using the name Roller Coaster. It spent 5 years there and was shut down. It's hard to believe that way back in the 1930s, they'd up and move a coaster 150 miles, but that's what they did. This made the trek through Connecticut, all the way across Massachusetts, and landed in Salem, New Hampshire. The plot of land was too small for the ride itself, so each section was shortened by 6 inches. Aside from being closed for hurricane repair in 1955, Greyhound, aka Yankee Cannonball, has been operational ever since. Number 10, Space Mountain at Disneyland. This opened in 1977, fulfilling Walt Disney's dream of a space-themed Matterhorn-style coaster, and over the years, it's been tweaked and upgraded. In 1996, they added on-ride sound. That was a great upgrade to the ride experience, but the ride was not designed for the extra weight on the trains. By the turn of the century, inspectors found that the track and supports had become compromised, and by continuing to let it operate as is, it could have experienced a structural failure. Despite the ride being over 20 years old, instead of tearing it down and building something more modern, Space Mountain got a full overhaul. Dynamic attractions came in and took out all the track, minus the station and the lift hill, redoing the turns to make them more refined and put less stress on the track, digging the supports further underground, closing down between 2003 and 2005, but still going strong to this day. Number 9, Comet at Great Escape. This started its life at Canada's Crystal Beach in 1927 as the Cyclone, possibly the most intense coaster ever built. After 20 years, it was torn down and rebuilt with a different layout, one that didn't require a nurse to be in the station. It would reopen in 1948 as the Comet, serving more than 50 years at the park. In 1989, Crystal Beach closed down and the Comet was in limbo. Charles Wood was a theme park developer in upstate New York, owning both the Great Escape in Queensbury and Fantasy Island in Grand Island, and he wanted to bring the Comet to Fantasy Island. He bought the ride for $210,000 and put it in storage at Fantasy Island. That same year, he sold both parks to the IBC, or International Broadcasting Corporation. For the next 3 years, Wood served as CEO but not the owner. But in 1992, the IBC went bankrupt, and Wood bought his parks back. In 1994, Wood sold Fantasy Island and moved the Comet back to his other park, The Great Escape, opening in time for the 1994 season and serving as a star attraction at the park to this day. The Comet inspired Fantasy Island's new owner to build his own wooden coaster, and Silver Comet was born in 1999. Number 8. Black Diamond at Knoebels. This opened as Golden Nugget Mine Ride at Hunts Pier in Wildwood, New Jersey. This was a PTC coaster, engineered by John C. Allen and built by the park itself. It was an indoor coaster standing 3 stories high. Hunts Pier became Dinosaur Pier in 1996, and then it closed down in 1998, Golden Nugget closing along with it. Maurice Piers bought the park, stating they had non-amusement plans for the pier. This stood idle from 1999 to 2008, and Maurice Piers said they were finally going to tear it down, but give it a farewell ceremony on January 31st, 2009. Just 5 days before that happened, Knoebels came in and bought the ride, track and trains and all, moving it all to Ellisburg, Pennsylvania, giving it a new theme of the state's haunted coal mines. It would now be known as Black Diamond and has been in operation since 2011. Number 7. Eurostar at Anapa Park Jungle. This is a rare, intimate inverted coaster, first manufactured in 1995 and spanning over 10 years traveling the German fair circuit. It's a portable coaster standing almost 100 feet tall, over 2,700 feet of track and having 4 inversions. This was bought by Gorky Park in Moscow, Russia, opening for the 2008 season and serving 4 years, being dismantled after the 2011 season. The ride disappeared and most believed it to be scrapped. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, it reopened at Anapa Park Jungle, another Russian park near the end of the summer in 2019. Nobody knew what was going on with this for 8 years, so when this came back, it was truly like this came back from the dead. Number 6. Wild One at Six Flags America. You know those horror movies where all these fatal things happen to the bad guy, and it doesn't seem to faze him at all. Well, that's Wild One. It opened as Giant Coaster at Paragon Park all the way back in 1917, located in Nantucket Beach, Massachusetts. This is a PTC wooden coaster designed by John A. Miller, built by Herbert Paul Schmeck, and it lasted 67 years at Paragon Park, but it wasn't without its problems. This survived not 1, but 2 fires, one in 1932 and the next in 1963. The first time, PTC used the opportunity to change it from a side friction coaster to one that uses upstop wheels. The second time, the ride was much more badly damaged, and the park couldn't afford to rebuild it with the original layout. It lost 2 airtime hills and the final helix, but at least the park could afford to keep the ride. Paragon Park was closed in 1984, and Giant Coaster was put up for auction. Wild World made the winning bid, and asked Charles Dinn to move it to the park in Bowie, Maryland. He would be aided by Curtis D. Summers, and he was able to restore the helix that was lost more than 20 years prior. It would be known as Wild One and reopened for the 1986 season. This gained a reputation as a rough ride in its first few years, and closed down after the 1990 season. The park was then sold to the Tierco Group, and they invested the money into fixing the ride. That included a lot of retracking and reprofiling. This coaster has survived the Grim Reaper many times, and 106 years later, it's still going strong at what is now Six Flags America. Number 5. Battlestar Galactica at Universal Studios Singapore. This park opened in 2010, its star coaster being this Vekoma dueling launch coaster, one side more mild and on top of the track. That's called the human side. And then there's the Cyclone side. That's inverted and has 5 inversions. After just a week of operation, the park found a problem with the ride vehicle, and the ride closed for 11 months. The car on the human track was falling apart, high stress levels causing fatigue cracks. The problem was fixed, the ride was recertified, and it reopened in early 2011. This wasn't the end of the story. In the summer of 2013, the ride shut down again and there was no official word from the park. 16 months later, the park announced the vehicles would have to be replaced. This reopened in May 2015, almost 2 years being closed, and the main difference was the 4 across seating being replaced with 2 across. This has been going strong for over 8 years now. Number 4. Giant Dipper at Belmont Park. Located in San Diego, this opened in 1925 with the Giant Dipper being its star attraction. Designed by Pryor and Church, this stands 73 feet tall and covers 2,600 feet of track. In 1955, a fire erupted in the engine room, killing Walter T. Barney, who operated the ride for 7 years. It damaged the train and the loading area, causing a 2-year closure. Over time, its maintenance got worse and worse, and in 1976 it closed down. Standing but not operating for over 5 years, the coaster became a hangout for transients, and there were calls for the coaster to be demolished and the area redeveloped. However, Tim Cole and his Save the Coaster committee banded together, and in 1987, they got the ride designated as a National Historic Landmark. $2 million was invested in restoring the coaster, and after 14 years of standing idle, it reopened in 1990. Number 3. Regina at Tobu Zoo. In 2000, this Japanese park opened a massive Intamin wooden coaster, 121 feet tall, almost 4,400 feet of track. This served 19 years at the park and then was announced to be shut down. The park said the ride had deteriorated, and they apologized for the sudden farewell. This was a definitive statement, no mention of refurbishment. The ride was just gone. It stood idle for 2 years, and in November 2021, it was seen testing, and the speculation was that it would be sold. A few days later, the park announced the Regina Renewal Project, a new steampunk theme, new trains from GCI, and it would be ready for the spring of 2023. Everyone wrote off Regina, but as of this year, after taking 4 years off, it was back in action. Number 2. Wildfire at Kolmården. Nobody expected this zoo in Sweden to get a massive RMC wooden coaster, but in 2016, that's exactly what they did. It opened on time, but just 4 months after it opened, its future was in serious danger. The coaster was shut down, the government revoking its permit because of environmental concerns. The court was looking for a detailed plan the park never completed, and the park said they followed all the guidelines while building the ride, now being given a different story from the government after a full season of operation. The president of the Construction and Environmental Committee even said, "It's likely that we will ask them to remove Wildfire." We finally got the full story. It turns out Kolmården didn't get the permits it needed, but they were told at the time it was okay. Now, there were some people that were unhappy with that call, and now they were putting the screws to Kolmården. The two sides worked together in 2017 to dot their I's and cross their T's, getting all the paperwork filed and the approvals done. And by late June, about a year after its debut, Wildfire was reborn, given a new lease on life, and it's been thrilling guests from around the world ever since. Number 1. Cyclone at Luna Park in Coney Island. Perhaps the most iconic coaster in the world, Cyclone opened in 1927 and inspired dozens of other coasters that followed. This is a staple of New York City, but there was a time where its time seemed like it was up. The Coney Island area was in decline by the late 50s. All the parks in the area closed down by 1964, and the Cyclone was sold to the city the next year. The city wanted to expand the aquarium that was built just east of the coaster, and they acquired the coaster via eminent domain, paying the owners $1.2 million in 1969. In 1972, the plans were made public. The aquarium was going to replace the Cyclone with a swamp display. This launched a campaign from pro-Cyclone advocates called Save the Cyclone, pitting the aquarium against the Chamber of Commerce, who had different stances on if the Cyclone should stay or go. In 1974, the city decided that tearing the coaster down would hurt the economy too much, and sought out someone to lease operation of the ride. Astroland won the bid, spent $60,000 to refurbish the ride, and it was back open in the summer of 1975. Through efforts to tear it down, the ebbs and flows of quality of the surrounding area, changes of ownership, Hurricane Sandy, nothing could take down the Cyclone, and it remains in operation today, still providing a great ride, 4 years from its 100th birthday. That's a wrap on the coasters that came back from the dead, part 2. I just want to thank everyone who commented on last year's video and gave me more ideas to make this sequel. Here are some of the people who helped make this one possible. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like, and if you're new here and want to see more content like this, please give me a sub. Click the card on my end screen to see part 1. Also, check out my links below for my Discord server, and my second channel where I post copyright-free off-ride footage, and my baseball channel if you also happen to be a baseball fan. Everyone have a happy Halloween, and I'll see you all next time.